Hello everyone. So we are starting our discussion of our Anubhav second test for CSAT. Before we start, let me just give you a brief overview of the kind of questions that have been asked. So we know that in passages for your CSAT passages or for verbal passages, we get questions like inferences and assumptions. The reason why I mentioned these at the start is these are usually the problematic ones. Students have a little problem with finding the distinction in each. I'll talk about that shortly. So inference and assumptions are the most common question type among the ones asked. Then there's summary, which one of the following best sums up the author's argument. Then there's main point of the author or message of the author, right? And we can also include some other application based questions, but for the moment we'll say these are the most probable questions asked. Implications, etc. can all be considered as inferences. So since these are the question types that are asked, we have created the paper based on previous year UPSC papers, you know this, and most of the questions that are asked are of this nature. You have somewhere close to 26 questions and from passages, and I would say that at least according to me 3 to 4 questions only can be considered difficult. The rest of the questions are very doable. So if you're someone who wants to know how many passages versus quant questions versus LR questions to solve, this is, you could have skipped maybe 3 or 4 out of the 26 questions. But essentially the verbal passage questions can be considered easy to moderate. Just 3 to 4 questions can be considered difficult. A few times, especially initially as I continue the discussion, I will explain some concepts, and then throughout the passages we'll continue discussing those concepts such as inferences and assumptions. So we'll start with the first question. Now, when you get a passage which has 2 questions which follow it, which is question 1 and question 2. So if a passage has 2 questions, there is no point reading the question first. But we'll look at the next question for a moment. Next, passage 2. Passage 2 has 1 question, for example. This just has 1 question. So in this case, I will read it just has this 1 question. I will read the question first and see what is asked and then read the passage. Okay. This is not required for our first passage because first passage has 2 questions which follow it. So when I read a passage like this, I try and figure out its main point. Because I don't know what could be asked from this, there are 2 questions which are asked. So I anyways first need to identify its main point, right? Okay. So urbanization has led to rapid growth and it's beneficial for cities. However, unchecked urbanization comes with challenges such as environmental challenges. So we are told what unchecked urbanization challenges could be like. Many passages you'll notice have problem solution approach. Here are the problems. The solutions would be sustainable urban development requires. So this is where sustainable urban development is being recommended by the author because we want to overcome these challenges. So this is, we can say, is the solution given by the author. And it requires all these things. Effective governance is required. Public participation and awareness is also required. So the passage is talking about challenges in urbanization and how ideally to approach urbanization, how to get sustainable urban growth, right? So fairly easy passage. Now let's go to question 1. Question 1 is asking which of the following statements can be logically and rationally inferred. If you've attended classes with me, you know that we focus only on the word inferred. These words can be changed and UPSC does change them frequently. They don't really have any impact. We just focus on the word inferred. For inferences, the usual example given, and we use this example, is that we put 2 facts together such as dark clouds in the sky and water in streets. We put these two facts together and we come up with something new, which is it has rained. So what we want to realize is a valid inference, in this case, this is the valid inference, required two facts. Sometimes a valid inference may need one fact, but without these facts, an inference is impossible. If I didn't have dark clouds, I can't infer rain. If I didn't have water in the streets, I can't infer rain. I needed both those facts. And rain was not contained within this. It's a fresh conclusion we have made. So this is what an inference is. We are being asked here to infer something, which is like we are asked to check whether this is a valid, this entire thing is a acceptable valid inference based on the evidence in the passage or not. Okay, so that's what an inference is. You can listen to that again in case you have a challenge with inference questions. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm looking for each word unchecked urban growth negatively impacts the environment and public services. And you'll notice that from the right, you'll notice that here we are told, however, unchecked urban growth often comes with challenges such as environmental degradation, inadequate waste management, overburdened public services, poor urban planning contributes to traffic congestion, etc. So if we look in the passage, we find evidence for every word here, which is urban growth negatively impacts through the environment and public services, unchecked urban growth. This is a valid inference. This is a valid inference. This tells us that D is not our answer. By the way, just keep this idea in mind. My expectation is in the 2025 paper, you'll get many questions with more than 2 statements, with 3 statements, 4 statements, 5 statements, etc. So each time there are multiple statements and we find that one of them is valid or invalid, we quickly decide what to do with the options. And here we know D is not a valid option. Let's look at 2. Sustainable urban development is impossible without public awareness and participation. So I know where sustainable urban development is discussed in the solution section of the passage. If you notice, if you've paid attention to main point of the author, you can navigate through the passage much better. So this is going to be in the second half of the passage. Is impossible needs to be checked without public awareness and participation. So we'll check if it's impossible. All right. And let's see here, the last line tells us public participation and awareness are also required, right? These are required to ensure that urban policies align with the needs of residents and environmental sustainability. If you read the first, the line prior to this, it says sustainable urban development requires XYZ and public participation and awareness are also required. So these are required, right? So it is impossible without public awareness because they are required. So impossible is valid because passage says required. So I want you to learn about the inference example that I had spoken about. We use 2 facts to come up with a new fact. Since we know required is mentioned twice, especially when it comes to public awareness and participation, also required is mentioned. So therefore, impossible is acceptable for us. So 1 and 2 are valid. Let's look at 3. Innovative technologies and green infrastructure are key to creating livable cities. So let's look at 3. Innovative technologies and green infrastructure are key to creating livable cities. This is actually stated. We are told investment in green technologies, adoption of innovative technologies is needed, right? So 3 is a valid inference. The right answer here is option A. 4, which says urbanization inevitably leads to a decline in the quality of life. This is invalid, right? Inevitably is not discussed. The author has offered us solutions. So that means inevitable is invalid. A is the right answer for question number 1 in your set C. By the way, just to tell you, this is from set C. We are using set C as our solving set. For which of the following assumptions have been made? Let me just give you the example of assumptions, so then we can proceed quicker later. For assumptions, the example we use is A tells B go to the market and buy vegetables. Right? Go to the market and buy. A tells B, go to the market and buy vegetables. For assumptions, we consider for our example this as the whole passage for the sake of discussion. From this, we can make a valid assumption like B knows the way to the market. Right? What I've written here is B knows the way to the market. The reason why I can say B knows the way to the market is because A tells B go to the market. This tells us it's a specific market which the listener, who's B in this case, knows about. If I say A is the boss of B, that would be invalid. I can't say that based on tells. So inferences are us making a fresh conclusion from some facts. Assumptions are us trying to find the logic underlying this passage. This passage has some logic. A tells B go to the market and buy vegetables. This has some logic underlying it in theory, which is B knows the way to the market. If I say B does not know the way, if I add not to this, B does not know the way to the market, the original passage stops making sense. So what I did by adding the word not here is I used a way to check whether this is a valid assumption or not. If I add the word not and the original passage stops making sense, that means this is a valid assumption. So this is usually stated as, if I negate a valid assumption, the passage will get negated, right? Something of this nature. Okay. So let's look at assumptions. Effective governance is crucial for addressing the challenges posed by rapid urbanization. So effective governance, is it crucial or not? We need to check. All right. Increased infrastructure, inadequate, poor urban planning, development, effective governance is directly stated in the passage. I was just looking for that phrase. Effective governance requires effective governance and investment in green infrastructure. All right. So it is crucial. Required is written again. We had discussed this before. And 2, investment in green infrastructure can improve the quality of life in urban areas. This also has been stated in the second half of the passage as a underlying logic of the passage. It's not directly stated. It's stated as required or can. Now, what I want you to remember about assumption questions is, before marking C as the right answer, which is the right answer, both 1 and 2, what habit we want to cultivate is, if we are looking at these as valid assumptions, we add the word not. And if the passage stops making sense in that case, that means these are valid assumptions. So as a best practice for us to follow, for assumption questions, if we want to maintain accuracy, even in the time of, even if you're running short of time, you'll have to practice this. You want to run this test really quickly. So that way you know what option you're picking is valid. C is the right answer here for question number 2 in set C. Let's look at passage 2. In recent studies, researchers have found that an increase in, by the way, the passage 2 we have already seen, the question from passage 2 is an assumption question as we had seen. So I know what to expect. Since it's an assumption question, for assumption and inference questions, I quickly read through the passage and I don't really bother finding the main point out. For the prior passage, we had 2 questions. So I worked on it more before I went to the question. I know it's an assumption question. Assumptions like inferences can be asked from any point in the passage. So I'm quickly going to figure out what the passage is about. And this passage is about researchers have found that an increase in average global temperature has led to a shift in the migration pattern of certain species. So this migration, and we are given an example, this migration, some birds have started migrating earlier while others have delayed, and this has led to multiple issues, this kind of delayed migration. Warmer temperatures that alter availability of food sources. As these patterns shift, ecosystems that rely on these species get hampered or damaged. So essentially we are told an increase in average temperatures has affected migration patterns of certain species, which has caused further disruption downline. All right. Based on the passage, which of the following assumptions have been made? 1, increased global temperatures are affecting the migration patterns. This is are affecting is valid from the first line in the passage. If I said are not affecting, the first sentence of the passage would get invalidated. So statement 1 is a valid assumption. This is a valid assumption. Statement 2, changes in bird migration patterns lead to serious consequences for agriculture, right? So this was a tricky question for many students. We'll see increased global temperatures are affecting, if I say are not affecting, passage stops making sense. When 2 says changes in bird migration patterns lead to serious consequences. Lead to serious consequences for agriculture and biodiversity is not written. And I'll tell you how to check for this. First, I check serious consequences, whether I can accept this or not. And you'll notice in the passage, we are told as these pattern shifts, ecosystems that rely on these species may face disruption, right? May face disruption. So I can't say lead to serious consequences. If I said may not lead to serious consequences, this also makes no difference to the passage. May lead to, may not lead to, right? So by adding the word not, we should just add the word not here and not may not. Don't lead to. Adding the word not has no impact on the passage. So this tells us A1 only is the valid assumption. This is the only valid assumption. 2 is an invalid assumption for serious consequences. All right. Let's look at the next passage. The next passage is talking about the rise of EVs, which offers a promising solution. It has one question which follows it, which is looking for the central message. So this we want to identify before we reach the options. So the central message is rise of EVs offers a promising solution to reduce pollution dependence, etc. However, widespread adoption of EVs depends on. So a promising solution is there to reduce pollution, but it depends on XYZ factors, significant challenges such as improving battery technology, expanding charging infrastructure, ensuring sustainability. Additionally, there's a need for governments to offer incentives that make EVs affordable. Without these efforts, the transition to EVs may remain limited and the potential environment benefits may not be fully realized. So I have marked out what is the main point of the author. A coordinated approach involving government, private sector and consumers is essential to driving the future of electric mobility. So what kind of efforts are needed for us to ensure that EVs can actually offer a promising solution? Okay. Now, when we are looking for the main point of the author, there can be multiple reasons to reject an option. One can be some fact has been misstated by the author. Another reason to eliminate an option would be some opinion has been restated by the author, right? Or misstated by the examiner. Some fact is misstated, opinion is misstated. These are fairly easy for us to notice. The harder reasons to notice why an option may be incorrect are reasons like this, which is main point is partial or incomplete. These are difficult to pick out Because sometimes what the examiner will do is one option will have only the solution mentioned, or one option will only have the problem mentioned. In that case, we choose the one with the solution. So main point should always be represented in as best a way as possible, right? Between problem and solution, we select solution because problem is usually just the topic of the author. Solution is what the author really wanted to talk about in most cases. So what we are looking for is a complete understanding of the main point of the author, right? Let's look at option B. Governments can make electric vehicles affordable without relying on private sector. This is invalid firstly. Second, it's not reflecting the central message of the author. It's not telling us why electric vehicles are needed. It's not telling us how to make them a reality. These are not discussed in option B. Option D says the transition to electric vehicles should solely depend on private companies. So this is a factual error. This is not stated by the author, an error of fact. So D is invalid. B and D are incorrect. Between A and C, we want to check. C says electric vehicles are not yet a viable solution due to their high production costs and limited charging infrastructure, right? So I know many students would actually go with option C, are not yet a viable solution. Okay, we'll put option C aside. I have only marked option C and these words, especially because I know students have gone with it. We'll put option C aside. Option A says widespread adoption of electric vehicles requires, so widespread adoption of EVs requires technological, infrastructural and economic challenges to be overcome, correct? So between these two options, do you know what the problem both of these options have? Both options A and C have this problem, okay, and one of them is better than the other. Both don't mention why, a solution for what, right? Overcoming challenges, but for what? We are doing this to ensure damage on the planet is lesser, essentially, right? We are told to reduce pollution and dependence. This is why we are doing all of this, correct? None of the options actually mention this. So between these two choices, which one do we go with? Electric vehicles are not yet a viable solution due to production costs and limited charging infrastructure. So let's say both options A and option C are somewhat partial. They are somewhat incomplete, right? How do I make sure I choose the right one? I try to find out which has mentioned the solution in a better way, right? The passage had some solutions. We are told how to do this. Governments should do this. A coordinated approach is required. This is the future of electric mobility. We are told throughout the second half of the passage how EVs should be provided some support through the government or through some rules or regulations. So nothing in option C tells us how to solve this. They are not yet a viable solution. So how do I make them a viable solution? Not discussed in option C. Let's look at option A, the widespread adoption of electric vehicles, which is basically telling us this is a problem, how to solve this problem. Problem is not exactly discussed as is discussed in the passage. Problem is also partial with option A. But this requires overcoming A, B and C, or let's say overcoming 1, 2 and 3. These challenges and overcoming these challenges. So therefore option A is the only option which is discussing solution. Option A is the only acceptable option we can have. So correct answer for this question is option A. Alright, this was a little tricky question for students. I would categorize that as moderate. Question type is easy. Central message is an easy question type. Since A and C were a little confusing, there was no ideal option. I would say this is a moderate level question. A is the right answer. Alright, let's look at the next set. We have passage 1. Passage 1 has one question which is asking us best expresses the ultimate purpose of education. ये main point question ही है. Best expresses ultimate purpose of education. Actually passage का main point है. इसीलिए this question becomes a main point question. So primary function of education, which is the main point of the author, is not just knowledge, but to cultivate wisdom and ethical understanding. wisdom or ethical understanding चाहिए. Education should help individuals develop capacity to think critically, etc. The purpose of education is to equip individuals with tools they need. So all of this is talking about how education should be used to actually give a broader understanding to students about wisdom, about common good, about creativity, etc. Education should never be reduced to a mechanical process of memorization and regurgitation. So it is about enabling and nurturing the mind, right? Fairly easy, straightforward passage, what we would say, all right? So let's go through the options. Let's look at A, to impart technical skills. We are looking for purpose of education. The author says purpose is not only knowledge, right? This is very clear from the passage. It's not just knowledge, it should be stuff more than knowledge. So A says to impart technical skills for employment and help everybody become creative. Impart technical skills for employment. This, if we are trying to capture ultimate purpose of education, this is narrow or incomplete, right? And help everybody become creative. This sounds like a factual error, right? This is not the ideal representation of what would be the purpose of education, everyone becoming creative. So this would be invalid. To foster creativity and critical thinking while promoting social responsibility. So let's say A is invalid. All right, let's say A is one moment. Let's say A is invalid. B says to foster creativity and critical thinking while promoting social responsibility. We know fostering creativity is discussed, critical thinking is discussed, while promoting social responsibility is discussed. Now what I want you to learn here from this question type is B could very well be the right answer, but there is a chance that C and D actually give a better representation of purpose of education. So we need to check before we accept option B. It sounds like it could be the right answer. And by the way, when I say it sounds like, this is just for me to discuss this with you. When I am solving the exam, solving in the exam, or when I'm solving the paper, I'm never trying to check if an option sounds correct or sounds incorrect. I actually go back to the passage and check if it's acceptable. Option B is acceptable from the passage. Option C says to ensure academic excellence through creativity and exploration. This is also talking through creativity and exploration. The problem with option C is it says to ensure academic excellence. This is invalid, right? Ensuring academic excellence has not been stated. This is not the ultimate purpose of education. Only imparting skills is not the purpose. So D says to prepare individuals for understanding ethics and social responsibility. Now let's compare option B and D. To prepare individuals for understanding ethics and social responsibility, to foster creativity and critical thinking while promoting social responsibility. So if I said option D has a factual flaw or factual misrepresentation, it's for us to figure that out, we have to read it carefully. Option D is saying to prepare individuals for understanding social responsibility. This is not, if we said individuals, through education, individuals should better understand social responsibility, that's acceptable. Through education, individuals should better understand social responsibility. That could be one of the purpose of education, not the ultimate purpose, but one of the purpose. I can't say to prepare individuals for understanding social responsibility. D is invalid. B is the correct answer for question 11. All right, question 11, answer B. We have passage 2, which reflects the main idea of the passage, right? Okay, so let's find out the main idea. In a rapidly changing world, adaptability is more valuable than ever. As technology evolves, so societal norms shift, ability to adjust and thrive in new circumstances is key factor in long-term success. So same point is repeated. Adaptability is more valuable. The words I'll remark when I'm reading this is a key factor in long-term success. While tradition and routine provide a sense of security, it is flexibility that allows individuals and societies to navigate uncertainty. The world may often present challenges that require creative problem solving, right? So again, the challenges of the world can be solved by adaptability, by creative problem solving. And those who are open to change find innovative solutions. The skill to adapt does not mean abandoning values or beliefs, but it means being open-minded, willing to adjust methods when necessary, all while maintaining the core essence of what we believe in. So author is saying in a changing world, adaptability is valuable. It's a key factor for long-term success. And how to ensure that adaptability is discussed here. It's does not mean abandoning values. It's about being open-minded, etc. Right? Okay. So let's go through the options. We are looking for main idea. A says routine and tradition are as important as adaptability in achieving success. So routine is as important as adaptability. This is firstly factually invalid, and it doesn't tell me what role adaptability has in achieving success. We want to discuss what role adaptability has in a changing environment and how adaptability can be achieved. If we want an ideal representation of the main point, we want to tell how and what role adaptability has. So A is invalid. B says adopting new technology is key to success in a rapidly changing world. I know many students have also gone with B because while reading fast, adopting and adapting is missed out on. And adopting new technology is key, is invalid. Adapting to change creatively is valid. Adopting new technology is key to success is factually unacceptable. B is invalid. C says sudden change in societal norms is harmful to long-term success. C has no mention of main point, which is adaptability. D is the only possible choice. Adaptability enables individuals and societies to navigate uncertain environments. So D is again missing a few points that are mentioned in the passage, but it's the only possible answer. So this is an easy question. I would categorize this as a easy question. All right. Let me look at what question is being asked. We are asked most logical, rational and practical suggestions implied. When you're looking for practical suggestions implied, see what is discussed in the passage and what change the author expects. When I say what change the author expects is, these words are important. That means I have to use the words of the author only to determine which of these changes is acceptable. I can't simply suggest any new change which is not mentioned anywhere in the passage, right? It should be this change, suggestion implied, this change the author wants should be based on information in the passage, okay? All right. So recent studies have shown that urban forests provide more than just aesthetic value. They act as natural air filters. So urban forests, natural air filters. This we know, but I'm just marking because what is implied by it we'll need to check. So they absorb all dust, etc. In addition, improving air quality, they also mitigate urban heat islands, providing cooler temperatures. We know this. Researchers found that cities with more greenery tend to have lower rates. More greenery, lower rates of diseases. Urban forests are therefore not just luxuries but essential components of sustainable city planning. Okay, let's not go to the options first, but if we just read the passage and which would be practical implications suggested by the author, right? So the passage is talking about urban forests, we'll oversimplify it, are good, right? So the suggestions given by the author, implied suggestions, practical suggestions given by the author would be like, we want more urban forests, right? This is what we are expecting. Okay, now let's look at more urban forests is what we are expecting. Let's look at option A. Urban forests are not just an aesthetic luxury that adds beauties to cities. So this is option A is a valid fact, right? It's a valid fact. but it's not a practical suggestion implied. We want some to do. What should we do? This is simply telling us a fact. Forests are not just an aesthetic luxury. True. But what action am I supposed to take? The passage had told me what actions to take. I need to promote urban forests in cities more. That's what we're looking for. Option A, although it restates words from the passage in a factually correct way, it's not the best, most practical suggestion implied, right? So A is invalid. B says urban forests should be prioritized for their environmental and public health benefits. So B is saying something like, therefore, more urban forests. We'll put B aside. Seems like a really good practical suggestion. Let's look at C and D. Urban forests should be promoted, especially to enhance their ability to reduce urban heat islands. So, especially to enhance reducing heat islands. This is not necessarily what the author stressed on, right? Best reflects the practical suggestion implied by the passage. Option C could be right, but it's stressing on something, especially to enhance, especially to reduce urban heat islands, right? So this is what is most problematic. Let's put C aside again. Let's look at D. Cities should now focus on creating green spaces for improving air quality. Should now focus on creating green spaces. Should now focus on tells us that some action needs to be taken. This could be considered valid because we are looking for practical suggestions. What is problematic is creating green spaces is not the same as urban forests. This is not the same, right? So I know some students would have gone with D also. D is definitely invalid. Creating green spaces is not the same. A is invalid. Between B and C, C has this problem, promoted especially to enhance. So the right option is option B. Option B tells us, therefore, more urban forests, right? B is the right answer for question 13. Let's look at passage 4. Passage 4 also has one question which follows it. It's a conclusion drawn. Conclusions can be drawn. This is an inference question. All right. Inferences can be from anywhere, so we are simply going to read the passage really quickly. A recent study conducted by marine biologists has revealed surprising link between size of coral reefs and biodiversity they support. Researchers discovered that larger coral reefs, despite being more vulnerable to climate change, tend to support a greater variety of marine species. This is the relationship they found. The study found that these reefs have more niches and habitats for different marine organisms. However, scientists also noted the ongoing effects of global warming. This could affect the health of even these reefs. Researchers suggest efforts to protect coral reefs. Alright, so fairly simple passage, how we should preserve reef size, measures to mitigate effects of climate change. Let's look at which of the inferences can be made from the passage. A says larger coral reefs due to their size are almost immune to the effects of climate change. Now we know this is what we need to check, and we know for inferences we are looking, or conclusions, we are looking for facts in the passage to make that conclusion. Almost immune ke liye we don't get anything that will help us say almost immune. Smaller coral reefs, so A is invalid. Smaller coral reefs with more habitat niches have lower biodiversity compared to larger ones. So smaller coral reefs with more habitat niches. We know this is factually inaccurate. This is invalid. Let's look at C. Protecting coral reefs requires both preserving their size and addressing climate change. So this could be the right answer from the last line of the passage. If you notice, the efforts to protect coral reefs must prioritize both reef size and climate change, right? So this could very well be the right answer. It seems like a valid inference. We just have to eliminate D. Global warming has more significant impact than on reef size. So this is invalid. This fact has not been stated. C is the only correct conclusion or inference we can make. So inference question, but an easy inference question, I would say. All right. So question 14, right answer is option C in set C. We are looking for, here you have 3 items from 3 passages. Let's look at the first question. It's asking for practical application of algae-based biofuels. So practical application based on the author's information, which of this could be a practical thing that we can do. So let's go through the passage. Recent research in renewable energy has focused potential of algae as source of biofuel. So algae as biofuel, it can produce large amounts of oil that can be converted into biodiesel. Unlike conventional crops, algae can be cultivated in various environments. Additionally, algae absorb carbon dioxide. This ability to grow in diverse conditions contribute carbon sequestration makes algae an ideal candidate for biofuel production. However, challenges remain in scaling up algae production, commercial use, etc. So author is recommending algae because of the impact it has. So carbon sequestration is important for us managing other things. Algae is also going to help us with meeting our need for fuel. So algae is being recommended, just like the prior passage was saying more urban fuel, this is saying more, right? So we'll look at which of these options is valid. All right. Let's look at A. Algae biofuels can be used to replace all fossil fuels for energy production. I don't expect anyone to go with all. All is invalid. Let's look at option D. They can only be produced in controlled environments. Invalid. So we can't say that these are practical applications, and all and only don't sound like practical suggestions or outcomes. We can't say therefore more application of urban forests, more applications of algae. So just remember, for these practical application type questions, I'm looking for this. Let's look at C. The use of algae for biofuels will be economically viable without causing any environmental damage. Challenges remain has been written, so C is invalid. B is the only correct answer. This offers a sustainable alternative, so therefore more, providing a clean source of energy while reducing greenhouse gases. B is the correct answer for this question. All right, let's look at, so I told you inference, assumption and main point summary, these are the main types of questions. We've seen two practical application type questions. I treat these as a subset of inference questions. I want the passage to give me some facts which are trying to say or trying to suggest that we should take some action. The author is not using those actual words that we should take some action. It's implied by the passage. So that's like an inference. And then we have to check which of these implications the author will say, yes, you should do this activity. So only option B is saying, yes, you should do this activity. You should invest more in the idea that I suggested, that the author suggested. All right. Remember that for these type of questions, it's a subset of inference questions. Let's look at the second question in the set. Main idea we are looking for. Main idea will identify first. In a thriving society, true strength is not just seen as wealth, but of institutions, but the fairness, equality, and welfare of most vulnerable members. True strength of a community is not institutions, but commitment to fairness and equality. So it is essential for a society to uphold these values. Without this foundation of fairness and equity, the society risks fracturing into divisions based on class, race, or other. So without this, there is a risk of fracturing. So society might break apart. True strength is equality and fairness. Without this, society might fracture. A strong, just society ensures that no one is left behind, irrespective of social standing or background. Task of ensuring fairness lies not only with the government, but with every member. So fairness is the true strength of a community. Without that, society will fracture. This depends on government and society members. So citizens, both have to work for this. Let's look at the main point of the author. A society's wealth and institutions are the primary indicators of its strength. Wealth and institutions are primary indicators is opposite of what the author said. A is invalid. Only the government can ensure fairness of society. Only government. B is invalid. C says a society that focuses on fairness is at risk of fracturing. This is opposite of what is stated in the passage. D says a society's success depends on the welfare of the most vulnerable members. Option D is the right answer. Society's success depends on fairness, which we can use as proxy for the welfare of the most vulnerable members. D is the right answer. This is the only option which comes close to the main idea of the author. We could have improved on option D. Option D could have had more words added to it. Depends on welfare, depends on fairness, depends on equity, depends on who, government plus society plus others working on this with a common goal. So D is the right answer. We could have added more to it, but we aren't. Let's see the next. Passage 3 question is, in the following scenarios, which aligns most closely with the dynamics described in the passage regarding decline in energy prices during 22-23? Aligns most closely with dynamics described in the passage. So based on facts in the passage, we want to infer with regards to what connection we can make of decline in global energy prices, right? So based on facts in the passage is what I wanted to highlight for you. All right. Let's look at the passage. According to the economic survey, major advanced economies played a significant role in the decline of global energy prices. So major advanced economies, significant role in global energy prices decline. Why? Because high level of economic synchronization, which led to substantial reduction in global energy demand. So synchronized substantial reduction of demand. As these economies aligned in terms of their economic activities and policies, the demand for energy decreased. This collective decrease in consumption contributed to lowering energy prices worldwide, helping to stabilize the market, ease some of the inflationary pressures caused by previous energy price surges. If you notice, each sentence is telling us the same thing, like they came together in a synchronized way and demand dropped. All right. So let's see which of these explains to us how this led to decline of prices. So let's look at A. Increased diversification of energy portfolios by developing countries reduce reliance on traditional energy sources. This did not take place. If you notice, this is basically asking us like a inference of sorts. Inference, but it's worded as slightly something else, but this is worded slightly as different, but it's an inference question. Increased diversification of energy portfolios by developing countries, reduced reliance. Diversification of energy portfolios nowhere discussed in the passage. In fact, there was synchronization and not diversification. So A is invalid. Let's look at B, a coordinated slowdown, a synchronized slowdown in energy demand among advanced economies indirectly impacted global energy prices. So option B also has a problem. I don't know if I can accept the word indirectly. So we'll put B aside. Let's look at C. Major energy exporting nations imposed stricter production quotas. This is nowhere discussed, resulting in reduced supply to global markets. And D says rapid technological advancements in energy storage led to decrease in consumption. So C and D are completely invalid. We're left with B. B says indirectly. One can say that the impact can be direct also. B is the right answer. The only possible answer here. All right. Okay. Let's look at the next set, which is also 2 passages, 4 questions. So some of these passages will have multiple questions. Passage 1 has 2 questions. So since passage 1 has 2 questions, I am not going to see the question stem first. I'm going to read the passage first, figure out what its main point is, and then I can proceed to the to looking at the questions or the question stem. All right. Okay. Let's start with this. UNEP reports that 8 million tons of plastic waste enter the oceans every year, primarily due to improper waste management. This waste, plastic waste entering oceans is improper waste management. So plastic waste threatens XYZ things. It causes significant economic losses. Microplastics are in health. Effective strategies such as reducing single-use plastics, improving recycling, etc. are critical to mitigating this issue. So some thing which is discussed as a definite solution. Definite because they are critical. So critical here is used as to say important, right? So are important in mitigating this issue. Solution is mentioned. Public awareness and community participation also play a crucial role in addressing the plastic pollution crisis. So we are told some solutions and why the problem exists. Problem exists due to improper waste management. So this is problem. And these are the last few lines. These 2-3 lines are solutions. All right. Fairly easy passage. Let's look at the questions which can be inferred logically and rationally. For my inference, I need some facts stated in the passage. Let's look at question 31. Poor waste management systems are a major contributor to plastic pollution in the oceans. We know this to be valid, right? Major contributor because the passage uses the same language, primarily due to, right? So major. So 1 is valid. 2 says plastic pollution directly impacts global economy through disruptions in key industries. So we are told here disrupts fishing and tourism industries, leading to significant economic losses. So plastic pollution directly impacts global economy through disruptions. These are valid. 3 says plastic waste in oceans poses potential risk to human health. This is also valid, discussed in the passage. 4 says addressing plastic pollution is solely the responsibility of governments. A is the right answer. All right. Option A is the right answer. Fairly easy question from the passage. The next one is an assumption question. By the way, the exam is never going to ask us what is an inference versus what is an assumption. ये डिस्टिंक्शन कोई कभी पूछेगा ही नहीं, तो ऐसा क्वेश्चन मत एक्सपेक्ट करना कि इज ऑप्शन ए एन इन्फरेंस और इज ऑप्शन ए एन अजम्पशन. ये कभी नहीं आएगा, राइट? वॉट आर द एग्जामिनर इज आस्किंग हियर, दैट्स ऑल आई एम लुकिंग फॉर इन द ऑप्शंस. ओके, लेट्स लुक एट स्टेटमेंट 1. Statement 1, encouraging community involvement is a key element in combating plastic pollution. So encouraging community involvement from the last line is crucial. If I said is not a key element, the last line would get negated. It's an assumption question. So I know I can use this test and I make sure to use that test before I accept a valid assumption. If I put not in the valid assumption, the passage will stop making sense. Statement 1 is a valid assumption. Statement 2 says the presence of plastic waste in the oceans cannot be reversed but can only be managed. This is a fairly tricky one. Cannot be reversed but can only be managed. So to what degree can our actions, to what degree can our positive actions have an impact? That is what statement 2 is checking. So we want to check, can or cannot it be reversed but can only be managed, what we can find in the passage. So let's see. Passage was easy for us to navigate. Now we are looking for to what degree we can manage this situation. In addressing plastic pollution crisis, critical in mitigating this issue. Notice this, mitigating this issue. So we can actually reduce the problem. We can actually reverse the problem. So cannot be reversed is invalid. It's not stated in the passage. It's an invalid assumption. A, mitigation is possible, right? Mitigation is, in this case, means reverse, right? So A is the right answer for question 32. Let's look at the next one. Passage 2 has 2 questions which follow it. Right, so we'll first simply identify the main point of the author. AI advancement is transforming industries. So AI role on transforming industries. AI-driven automation has significantly improved efficiency in manufacturing, healthcare, finance, even education. However, it also raises concerns about job displacement, ethical considerations, etc. So AI automation has good impacts. It also raises concerns. So improves things, also raises concerns. Good and bad of AI. While automation replaces repetitive manual tasks, it simultaneously creates opportunities. Governments, educational institutions, businesses must work collaboratively. So governments and other institutions must work collaboratively to upskill and provide skills to workers. Striking the right balance between innovation and accountability is essential for harnessing AIs. So what is essential to harness AIs is told in the last line. AI ke good impacts and bad impacts. How to optimize those impacts is discussed in the passage. Fairly easy passage. Let's look at question 33. Which of the following statements can be logically inferred from the passage? So, one, AI can lead to both job displacement and job creation. So, both job displacement and job creation is a valid statement, as we can tell from the passage. This is in the first two lines of the passage. I told you author is giving us positive and negative. This is discussed there. If I said in two, collaboration among stakeholders is necessary for managing ethical use of AI. The last sentence tells us what is essential, right? So is necessary. 2 is valid. 3 says AI implementation is more beneficial in technical fields than in creative ones. This insight has not been offered to us in the passage. Whenever we have comparative quantifying words such as more than, we check, and in this case this is an invalid comparison. 4 says AI advancement has already resolved the issue of workforce. This is completely invalid. A is the right answer, 1 and 2 only. Alright, let's look at the next set. So question 33, A is the answer. There's one more question from the passage, the assumption question. 1, ethical frameworks are currently insufficient for responsible implementation of AI. So are current ethical frameworks sufficient or insufficient? That's what we are searching for, right? So raises concerns about job displacement, ethical considerations, and potential misuse of technology. So we must work collaboratively to upskill workforce and establish ethical frameworks. So the author is saying we must, just pay attention to these words, we must have or build, establish ethical frameworks. Establish would be to build or create. So ethical frameworks currently are not good. Currently they are insufficient. If I said ethical frameworks are currently sufficient, the passage would stop making sense, right? If I said sufficient, the passage would stop making sense. They are currently insufficient. So this means this is a valid assumption. In assumptions, I can use the word not to check whether it's valid or not. So here we had to, since the negative is already present, we had to remove it and check. And we notice if we remove the word not in this case, the passage stops making sense. So this was a necessary assumption for the passage to exist. 1 is valid. 2 says without proper upskilling, AI's advancement will exacerbate unemployment issues. This is valid from the passage. So we must do this to ensure responsible, equitable implementation. Raises concerns about job displacement, right? And ethical considerations, potential misuse of technology. One moment. Which slide was that? Okay. So will exacerbate employment issues. Without, if you don't change track advancement, this will lead to employment issues. If I said will not, the passage will stop making sense. The right answer is option C, right? Question 34, this is valid. Right answer is option C. Okay, let's look at the next one in the set. So the next set has 2 passages, 4 items, just like we did right now. Okay, let's look at the first passage. Increasing reliance on algorithms in decision making across various fields has led to concerns about bias and accountability. So increasing reliance on algorithms this leads to concerns about bias and accountability. Algorithms are often viewed as objective tools. They reflect biases of the data. This is told to us before also. When such systems perpetuate or amplify, becomes a serious ethical issue for marginalized communities. Additionally, the lack of transparency in how algorithms function raises questions about accountability. Individual groups affected by these decisions find it challenging to seek redress. So algorithms are a problem for marginalized communities, and they could become a serious ethical issues if there is no accountability, and it's challenging for people to seek redressal. All right. Okay, so let's go through the questions. Best reflects the central idea. A says algorithms eliminate human error, making them reliable. Algorithms eliminate human error, making them reliable. Central idea is invalid. Central idea is saying we should use them carefully because they tend to have biases and they tend to favor or prefer the more general narrative as opposed to the marginalized narrative, etc. So B says algorithmic decision making may pose ethical challenges due to bias and lack of transparency. Option B seems like the closest possible choice already. We'll put B aside. We need to check if there are better versions of option B. C says the use of algorithms ensures fairness and equality in various fields. So ensures fairness is opposite of what is stated. D says development of algorithms requires significant computational resources. No mention of ethics, no mention of what impact it can have. Only option B actually discusses the author's main point. Very easy question from a very easy passage. All right. We are looking for assumptions. One says algorithms can reinforce social inequalities. If I said cannot, pura passage hi galat ho jayega. This is like the main point of the author basically, given in fewer words. One is a valid assumption. Two says transparency of algorithms is essential for accountability. Without transparency, accountability is difficult, is told to us in the passage. C is the right answer for question number 42. All right, option C is the correct choice. Let's look at passage 2, which also will have 2 questions from it. So I'm not going to read the question stems first. I'm just going to read the passage and identify the main point. In modern societies, consumerism has become a defining characteristic. So consumerism, defining characteristic of modern societies. Advertisements and social media constantly bombard. So again, consumerism is described to us. This has led to a culture where people often prioritize acquiring possessions over meaningful experiences. Studies have shown that this excessive focus on materialism can contribute to higher levels of stress. So excessive focus on materialism can contribute to higher levels of stress. Consumerism or materialism is a modern society defining characteristic. It could lead to more stress. People strive to achieve unrealistic standards. However, research also highlights that individuals who prioritize experiences and personal growth tend to report higher levels of long-term happiness and fulfillment. So here, research also highlights that individuals who prioritize experience and personal growth tend to report more happiness. So according to the author, if there is a question, there's no question like this, at least from what we could tell. We didn't look at each question in detail. But if there is a question about what action to take or what we should do, right? The implication here is we should prioritize experiences and not consumerism, right? This is implied by the author. Let's go through the questions. Yes, this is sheet C, question 43. Which of the following statements best reflects the central idea? Let's look at A. Consumerism promotes creativity, innovation, invalid. B says materialism often leads to dissatisfaction while prioritizing experience fosters happiness. B could be the right answer. C says social media is solely responsible for rise of materialism. Invalid. Long-term happiness is primarily determined by economic status. This is opposite of the passage. B is the only possible choice of the main idea of the author. Really easy question. Let's look at the next one. Assumptions have been made. So let's look at one. Advertising, social media play a significant role in shaping consumer behavior. So I want to check a significant role. I know they play a role based on the passage. I'm just checking the words a significant role. And if you notice here, we are told advertisements and social media constantly bombard as a measure of success. This has led to, so advertisements and social media bombarding has led to a culture where people often prioritize acquiring possessions. So their role has led to, advertising and social media's role has led to, so it has caused. So therefore a significant role is acceptable. These have caused a scenario, right? So a significant role is acceptable. One is a valid assumption. don't play a significant role बोलते हम लोग तो passage गलत हो जाता, right? So 1 is a valid assumption, we can check. 2 says the pursuit of material wealth does not necessarily lead to long-term happiness. This is valid. We are told the author says we want to prioritize experience. Prioritize experience, right? So the right answer here is option C. Right? Question 44, right answer is option C. We have 2 passages and 3 questions. Let's see how many questions this has. This has 2 questions. So let's just read the passage. Let's not bother about and figure out the main point. We'll bother about the questions after. The advent of social media has fundamentally transformed how information is disseminated. Social media, dissemination of information. In the past, traditional media outlets such as newspapers, television were primary sources. These outlets had editorial processes. So, past outlets had editorial processes in place to ensure content was verified. Social media, however, social media, however, has democratized the flow of information. So, social media has democratized flow of information, allowing anyone at the internet to share their views. This has made information accessible, but this has also led to spread of misinformation. So, some negative outcome of social media, dissemination of information. Social media platforms often prioritize sensational content. As a result, lines between truth and fiction have become blurred. Okay, so ill effect of social media, misinformation spread on social media, that's the topic of discussion. Now let's look at question 51. Alright, question 51 says, based on the passage, primary concern with the rise of social media. So, what is the primary concern with rise of social media? It has made information more accessible. This is not the primary concern. More misinformation is what we are looking for. Traditional media outlets are losing their relevance in the digital age. So, losing their relevance in the digital age, not again the primary concern. C says social media platforms prioritize sensational content over factual accuracy. So, prioritizing sensational content over factual accuracy could be the right answer. Let's look at D. The spread of information has become more regulated in social media. This is unacceptable. So, the right answer is option C. Alright, question 51, right answer is option C. Let's look at question 52. According to the passage, has social media changed the flow of information? Has the flow of information changed due to social media? A. It has made traditional media outlets more powerful. Invalid, not stated in the passage. D says it has completely replaced traditional media. Invalid. It has made easier for users to discern fact from fiction. This is also invalid. Discern would be to differentiate between fact and fiction. This is invalid. B is the only possible choice. It has allowed anyone with an internet connection to share information. This is stated as it is in the passage. B is the correct answer for question 52. Alright, passage 2 also will have one statement. If you notice, passage is a little long, but we'll go through the passage. Recent studies have shown that deforestation continues to be one of the major... I just quickly did look, what I wanted to tell you was, since it's a short passage with one question, I know I'm looking for primary message. So I'm looking to carefully identify the main point and then only look at the options, right? So first I have to identify the main point first. Alright, so recent studies have shown deforestation continues to be major contributors to climate change. The removal of forests reduces, so this seems to be the topic which the author is explaining. It reduces capacity to absorb CO2. Additionally, loss of forest disrupts biodiversity. While some argue economic development and urbanization require land, environmental costs are becoming increasingly evident. Deforestation also affects local communities that rely on forests. Forests provide essential resources. In response to this issue, many governments, organizations have advocated reforestation programs. However, experts believe without stricter enforcement of conservation policies, deforestation will continue to outpace reforestation efforts. The last line of the author, however, experts believe this. So, author is telling us this is the typical passage which we have already seen many times today. You will see this many times in the exam, which gives us problem and which gives us a, we'll call this a recommendation or a solution, right? Now, we know we are looking for main point. I already told you main point matlab I want the problem and the solution to be mentioned ideally. If you aren't mentioning some other things, then you should definitely mention the solution in an ideal way, right? So let's go through the options. A says economic development can continue without damaging the environment if deforestation is controlled. Okay, so we are looking for primary message. Primary message is to tell us how to undertake actions towards deforestation, such as stop deforestation or how to undertake reforestation, etc. Right? So option A sounds like a, even though economic development may continue, but option A sounds like a misrepresentation of our idea. A is invalid. B says deforestation is a major environmental issue that leads to loss of biodiversity and exacerbates climate change. What you want to notice is this is highlighting the problem fully, right? This is telling us that the problem exists. No mention of solution. Solution was, or rather the recommendation was, कि without stricter enforcement of conservation, deforestation efforts will continue to outpace. वो कहीं पे भी option B में mention नहीं है. It's only mentioning the problem. So we'll say incomplete. Problem only mentioned. Therefore incomplete. Reforestation programs are sufficient unacceptable to solve the problem. D says deforestation is necessary for economic progress. Invalid. So even though B is partial, it mentions the problem only. B is the best possible choice. So this is why I was talking about problem and solution at the start of this discussion of this question, that even if the solution is not mentioned in this case, none of these are mentioning the solution or the problem. So this gets closest to the author's argument. B is the correct answer. All right, let's look at the next set. We have the next question. One moment. Question 53. Yes, next set, passage 3. 3 items from 3 passages. So that means I have to check the questions first. Here we have the main point question, main message conveyed by the author of the passage. So we'll find out the main point first. Impact of climate change on agricultural systems is becoming increasingly evident. Climate change on agricultural systems. Rising temperatures, unpredictable rainfall, impact is being measured. Droughts. These changes are particularly challenging for small scale farmers who rely on predictable seasons. So particularly challenging for small scale farmers. While larger, more industrialized farms may have the resources to adapt, many small farmers lack the financial support and technology. So again, particularly challenging for small scale. In addition, the loss of biodiversity due to climate change is affecting soil health and availability of pollinators, which are essential for crop production. To safeguard food security, it is crucial to invest in sustainable farming. So for food security, it is crucial to invest in sustainable farming practices, improve access to climate resilient crops, etc., etc. Provide financial support to farmers in vulnerable regions. So recommendation or solution provided in the last line of the passage. Impact of climate change on agricultural systems is bad, and how we can change or improve that impact is discussed here. Let's look at question 61. All right. We're looking for the main idea. A says climate change is not significantly affecting agricultural systems. This is very easy, that it's invalid and will continue to be effective. A is invalid. B says small scale farmers are the only group affected by climate change and large farms will not be impacted. This is invalid. By the way, I'm saying invalid for factual reasons, but both A and B don't tell us the main message only. Main message is farming. If you want to undertake farming in this scenario of climate change, you have to take on a few changes, such as helping small farmers, etc., etc. The last line of crucial changes where solutions are mentioned. Let's look at C. To address the challenges of climate change, sustainable farming practices and support for small farmers are necessary. They are crucial. So C could be the right answer. Let's look at D. The loss of biodiversity is the primary cause for agricultural problems. Farmers should focus on conservation efforts. Farmers should focus on conservation, not discuss. Primary cause, not discussed. C is the only possible answer. Again, a fairly easy question. Okay, let's look at passage 2. Passage 2, again, it's a one question, one passage. So I'm looking for what is being asked. Main point. In recent years, urbanization has led to rapid expansion of cities, resulting in increase. So, impact of urbanization, expansion of cities, increased demand for housing, infrastructure, services. However, this growth also comes with significant challenges such as overcrowding, etc. The concept of smart cities has emerged as a potential solution. I'll mark the words potential solution, incorporating technology, data, etc. These cities have sensors and Internet of Things devices to moderate traffic, waste management, etc. However, the implementation of smart technologies also raises concerns about privacy and security. तो ये जो potential solution दे रखा है of smart cities, उस solution को भी एक challenge है, which is a security challenge and digital divide, as not all residents have equal access to necessary technology. So security challenge and equity challenge of the solution. So solution exists, but there is a security challenge to the solution and a equity challenge to the solution. Let's look at equitable challenge to the solution. Let's look at which option we can choose as correct message. A says urbanization should be slowed down to prevent overcrowding. Should be slowed down. Maybe we can say urbanization is discussed in a negative way. So the author does not want as much urbanization, but should be slowed down to prevent overcrowding is not the main message. So A is invalid. Smart cities are a perfect solution for all urban problems and should be adopted. A perfect solution for all urban problems is invalid. The use of smart city technologies can improve urban services, but it must address concerns about privacy and inequality. So smart cities are a potential solution according to the passage, if it addresses privacy and equality concerns. So C is the right answer. D says traditional methods should be maintained. This is nowhere discussed without embracing new technologies. C is the only possible answer. Again, really easy. Okay, so let's look at passage 3. Passage 3 also has one question which is also looking for main point. Let's look at the main point of the author first. Rise of social media has profoundly changed how people perceive themselves. Social media, perception of themselves and their relationships with others. Platforms have the ability to present idealized versions of life, leading to unrealistic comparisons, growing sense of dissatisfaction. So I'm simply marking words which will sort of summarize what is said before and after. Studies show that constant exposure to curated, filtered content contributes to feelings of inadequacy, low self-esteem. Same thing, their perception of self changes. This phenomenon, known as social comparison, is exacerbated by the desire for validation through likes and comments. As social media continues to dominate daily life, many individuals find themselves struggling with the pressure to meet unattainable standards, leading to an increase in mental health issues. So social comparison ki वजह से there are mental health issues such as anxiety and depression, right? Fairly easy passage. We know the topic. Which of the following reflects the message? Let's go through the options. A, social media is beneficial for fostering authentic self-expression, and so this is invalid, not the main message of the author. The desire for external validation is causing a rise in mental health issues. B could very well be right. B can include a few more words, but B could very well be right. We'll put it aside. Let's look at C. Social media provides a realistic view of people's lives. Realistic view of people's lives, completely invalid. And D says people who use social media are likely to experience increased happiness. Invalid. So the right answer is B. Although we could again add a few more words to it, but none of the other options are necessary, make this necessary. Option B is complete as compared to other options. Option B is the right answer. All right. Okay. So let's see the next one. Answer the item with two passages. With two questions. So one passage and two questions here, right? We don't need to read those questions because they could be, main point questions, inference questions. We'll just read the passage as it stands. The rise of digital currencies and blockchain has brought about major shift in the way financial transactions are conducted. So blockchain and digital currencies, major shift in the way financial transactions are conducted. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum have challenged traditional banking systems, so major shift, offering a decentralized, transparent alternative. However, the volatility of cryptocurrencies, lack of regulatory frameworks, concerns have raised several issues. So, cryptocurrencies have also raised several issues. Transition towards a digital economy requires both innovation and regulation to balance the benefits of digital currencies with the risks they present. So, what is required if you want to use digital currencies? The transition towards a digital economy requires both innovation and regulation. Since the author is making a recommendation, I'm simply paying more attention to it. Governments and financial institutions must work together to create safe and so these institutions must work together. All right. So digital currencies can be used. Digital currencies have had a major impact. They have raised several issues, but if there is innovation and regulation done by government and financial institutions together, then we can find solutions. Fairly easy passage. All right. Okay, so let's go through the question. Best reflects the key message of the passage. What you want to remember is, this is a slightly different way of asking the main point question. Main point has been split into parts, and we want to see which of them is closest to the main point. One, digital currencies are the future of financial system, and their use will increase with fewer risks. So they are the future. So they may be a part of the future, but are the future means their use will increase with fewer risks. Are the future would mean people would prefer them. Let's say people would prefer digital currencies to older currencies. We can't say this from the passage. So this is invalid. And will increase with fewer risks. This is invalid. If we take the right actions, then it may increase. So 1 is invalid. If 1 is invalid, these are out of question. So you essentially need to check 3 and 4 only. We'll also check 2 for the sake of it, but you could have just eliminated these. The use of digital currencies poses risks. This is valid, but proper regulation can help mitigate risks is also valid. We are told regulation and innovation done both by government and private organizations can reduce risks. So proper regulation can help mitigate risks is valid. This is a part of the main point of the passage. 3 says cryptocurrencies should be completely regulated and restricted to prevent misuse. So cryptocurrencies should be completely regulated and restricted to prevent misuse. Okay, so we'll look at 3 again and we'll look at 4 again. 4 says government should eliminate the concept of traditional banking systems in favor of digital technologies. So, okay, let's say 1 is completely invalid, 2 fits. Now you have to choose between 3 and 4. Okay, you have to choose between options 3 and 4. Okay. Now what you want to remember is this type of a question is going to appear in the exam, and I want all of you to think about this. I said a few questions could be difficult. In a main point question, right, which can be asked like this or can be asked with just 4 options and we have to choose one of those options. You can have partial ways to express the main point. You can have complete ways to mention the main point. You can have facts mentioned in the main point. You can have opinions mentioned in the main point. What you want is to choose the option which does this comprehensively. Almost like we aren't looking for a summary exactly. But if you're using a fact, it should be mentioned accurately. If you're using an opinion, it should be mentioned accurately. And the main point must be mentioned. So that brings us to, I can eliminate 1 easily, accept 2 easily. 3 says cryptocurrencies should be completely regulated and restricted to prevent misuse. So let me actually check that. We are told lack of regulatory frameworks have raised several issues. So since regulatory framework is lacking, therefore issues. Correct? The transition towards digital economy requires innovation and regulation. So requires regulation. And then we'll find more evidence. So what I want to tell you was 3 sounds incorrect, should be completely regulated. But this is valid because the passage says it lacks regulation. So 3 is valid, 2 is valid. We should say that the word should completely cause some problem, but we can check and justify it sort of. But 4 is not justifiable at all. So option B is the only option which comes close to the main point. Putting 2 and 3 together, we get part of the key message of the author, right? So B is the right answer, even though it had this phrase. This required some checking. So I can consider this question as difficult as compared to the other questions. Let's look at passage 2. Passage 2 is a summary question. One second, I just want to look at 2 items and answer the item that follows. So you have 2 passages and 2 questions, right? Okay. So we are looking for a summary here. Summarizes the main point of the author. So that's a summary question. That means we have to include, the ideal summary should include main point of the author, facts given by the author, opinions given by the author, etc. Right? Let's figure it out. Global shift towards renewable energy is gaining momentum as concerns about climate change and environmental sustainability intensify. So global shift of renewable energy is gaining momentum. Countries are increasingly investing in these technologies. While renewable energy offers long-term benefits and energy security, it also faces challenges such as intermittent nature of some energy sources. So it also faces challenges. Additionally, the initial cost of infrastructure development and the need for advanced technology can be barriers to widespread adoption. So there can be barriers to widespread adoption of these technologies. Nonetheless, the potential for job creation, technological innovation and energy are compelling reasons for governments and corporations to continue to push. So there are many compelling reasons, many benefits that push organizations to continue towards, organizations and governments to continue towards finding solutions. All right. Let's look at the question. Which of the following statements best summarizes the main point? And again, for summary, you've been given a split of options, which is an interesting way to ask the same question. By the way, if you look at the 22 or 23 paper, you get almost 17 main point questions, right? Main point / related to summary type questions. So we can expect that to take place in the future also. So you'll notice different ways of asking main point are tested from you because we expect some kind of change to take place. Let's go through the options. One says renewable energy is the only solution to energy and all countries must fully transition. So all of this is incorrect. That leaves us, we still have to check all the remaining 3. So the options are crafted well. 2 says while renewable energy has clear benefits, it also presents challenges that need to be addressed for broader adoption. 2 is talking about the benefits, has clear benefits, but also has challenges that need to be addressed. So 2 is going to be valid. 2 is the right answer. B is the right answer. 3 and 4 become invalid. The high cost is the primary barrier with no other significant challenges. This is invalid. Multiple challenges are discussed. 4 says government should focus on traditional energy sources like fossil fuel. 4 is completely unacceptable. So the right answer here is option B, which is 2 only. All right. So that brings our discussion to an end. The right answer for this question is option B. If you want to take home any message from the process of solving, is that for every option that I select or eliminate, I have a specific reason. So if a word is problematic in any option, usually all options will have some problematic word. You check whether it's applicable or not. And when I say applicable or not, I check back to the passage. And based on that comparison, only then I take my decision. If you ask me what is the primary marker for accuracy, the main marker, the primary marker for accuracy is if I can look at a piece of information like this notice that it's problematic, check back to the passage, and then determine whether this is acceptable or not. That loop of checking back is the most important process for maintaining accuracy. I cover these sort of questions in detail in our classes, so those of you who have taken classes before know what I'm talking about. Those of you who are simply taking the test, remember to be methodical in your solving process. Alright, so that's it from me today. Thank you everyone. I'll see you the next time when we're discussing the next Anubhav set. Thank you.